brothers and sisters, we should give some more time to thinking about this mystery of the cross, the suffering in our life, because it stands at the center of the world, the center of our spiritual lives. It's the way that God chose himself in Christ to show us the road to holiness. So, everything in Jesus' life speaks to us, and it culminates on the cross. But the cross is linked to the resurrection, and we should never forget this as well, that in order to reach the resurrection, in order to be ourselves with Christ, sources of power flowing in the world, it flows from the cross. So we must hold these truths together. And it's very important in our Catholic faith to ask God for wisdom. Wisdom is what allows us to see how all these beautiful truths of our faith find harmony and how they come together. So the temptation is to break them up and to put them up against each other, just like we're tempted to put justice up against mercy. But we saw in a few weeks ago that justice and mercy are not opposed. The scriptures say justice and mercy in God, they kiss, they embrace, they work together. They find their unity in God himself, who is perfectly just and perfectly merciful, all at the same time. And our minds, think in parts. We think in segments, you could say. So, but more fundamentally, think these mysteries in God are united, and it's that wisdom that unites. And so, God is just when he is merciful, and his justice is also an extension of his mercy. Anyway, so come back to the theme of the cross. The point is that, the visionaries in Fatima said, above all, be faithful and accept the trials that God sends, that God allows. The scriptures are full of scriptures that point to the fact that we must be tested, to not for the sake of being tested, but for the sake of being purified like gold, or our hearts being formed and purified, our hearts being purified to become more loving, more truly human, more sensitive, more compassionate, more honorable, more virtuous. And so the cross is the essential litmus test of that, right? And nobody wants the cross. We don't desire suffering. Jesus showed us an example of that in the garden. He said, Father, let this cup pass from me. This immense cross, the cross itself before him, he wanted to, in his humanity, he showed us how it is human to have that prayer. But immediately as that desire rises in us, we reorient it to God's will. And we say, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. So this is a profound core of what holiness is seeing our life and all the situations of our life within a much bigger picture, the bigger picture of the gospel, and not a half gospel, but the full gospel, which says that the cross is what every Christian carries and goes through to find true life. And so how many of us have learned and become the best versions of ourselves because of the suffering of the past? I mean, you hear this a lot, but of course what we do with the cross really is the juncture. Either we allow the cross to crush us or to transform us. And that's where Christians have to make that fundamental decision. Either because of our pride, we rebel against it, and we get angry with God, and we start questioning God, and because our minds are too narrow and we can't see the full extent of his love. In fact, the cross and suffering is an expression of his love, because he's trying to form us into the best version of ourselves through the purifying blows of his love, which could feel very dark and terrible at times. So we either allow that, or we become proud and angry and resentful, etc. Now, at the same time, remember, God doesn't want us to go around miserable and downtrodden and oppressed. This is not what the cross means. The cross exalts us, and through the intimacy of the cross, we discover a joy with the Lord. Why? Because we start to suffer with the Lord in these moments. And we should master the little things in life first before putting big crosses onto ourselves. But naturally, life will just have its trials that come our way, and we have to learn how to make the best out of that and respond to that. And remember that this life is just a flicker compared to eternity. So if you look from God's perspective, suffering takes on a whole different angle, because if he is training us for eternity, then these things, if it's going to make us be able to receive him better at death and be full with his divine life, then he sees that. So, for example, if someone there, I know someone whose sibling passed away very suddenly, and they became very angry with God, and I can share this story. They became very angry with God. And yet I was thinking about this in prayer the other day, and I was like, yes, it is such a void and a terrible grief for us, and we want that person. But from God's perspective, God's side, why do we want to hold someone back from the joy from being with God on the other side? In a sense, so that's something selfish in us, because we want to be comforted by the presence of the person, absolutely. But God sees the greater thing. He calls them